You want to know, what are the best AI stocks to buy right now? So by now you've heard about the Stargate project. This is a new company. It intends to invest $500 billion, $500 billion with a B, over the next 4 years. Now this is going to build out new AI infrastructure for OpenAI in the United States, specifically Texas. This was announced earlier this week by President Trump, and he was joined by Larry Ellison from Oracle, SoftBank CEO, and Sam Altman from OpenAI. And then Musk says they don't actually have the money. SoftBank has well under $10 billion secured. I have that on good authority. Sam Altman, wrong, as you surely know. Want to come visit the first site already underway? This is great for the country, blah, blah, blah. Now, of course, if you know the background here, Musk was part of OpenAI back in 2015. I mean, Musk was there when Jensen Huang from Nvidia delivered the first DGX to OpenAI. He left the company 3 years later, citing a conflict of interest with his work at Tesla. Now, other sources will actually say that he departed because of differences with Sam Altman himself. Does it really matter? Not really. Why is any of this important? Because you can make a ton of money off of data centers. So today I'm going to break down that data center value chain and tell you exactly which stocks are going to benefit the most, which stocks you should own in your portfolio for the next 5 and 10 years to maximize profits. So the data center value chain. Now, you'll also see this, right? Data center power, security, and cooling. Look, Caterpillar and Generac. I'm going to buy Generac because more data centers mean more Generac. All right, let's not get too cute here. Let's not think too hard. I know it's fun to think outside the box. Like, oh, we're going to buy some John Deere because they're going to need extra equipment to build these data centers. Let's focus on what's really going on and where the money's being made in data centers. All right. Here's the thing about data centers. These require hundreds of companies. There's probably 400 different companies, but only a handful of those companies are truly beneficiaries. So this is what a data center really looks like when it's all said and done. Now, these can be absolutely massive, so it's important to understand. Some of the largest hyperscaler data centers right now are more than 1 million square feet. That's 25 football fields. So the infrastructure required to build these data centers includes the land, the construction, the transformers, the power management, the cooling technology, and more. Now, it's estimated that half of the cost, so 50% of the cost of data centers, goes into infrastructure. The other half, the other 50%, goes into compute, networking, and storage. And that's going to be this slide right here. Compute, networking, and storage. But about 50% of that, so a quarter of all data center, is going into GPUs, which is Nvidia. There is no question that Nvidia is still the top stock to own if you're trying to invest in data center. Now, of course, there's going to be competition. I'll talk about AMD later. And of course, you got the quantum bros, right? And social media that think quantum's going to replace GPUs overnight. That's not going to happen. The data center as we know it right now, this is what it looks like. Could that change in the future? Absolutely yes. Now, the hyperscalers are definitely stocks that I want to own in my portfolio, not just because of data center, but for so many other reasons. Amazon has its hands in so many different pots. Microsoft, Google, those 3 stocks, in my opinion, are must-own stocks for any portfolio. Nvidia, of course, is going to be the winner out of all of these when you think of data center value chain. And you can invest in companies like, Lam Research, and you can invest in ASML, and there are a ton of beneficiaries from AI. And it's not just AI. When you think of semiconductors, they're the new oil. And semiconductors are going to be the fuel that power everything, not just for data center, autonomous vehicles, 5G, Internet of Things, robotics. Everything is going to need semiconductors. The ultimate pick and shovel for all of these is going to be Taiwan Semiconductor, because Taiwan Semiconductor produces pretty much all the advanced chips in the world. Taiwan produces 90% of the advanced chips in the world. So when you think of fabs, a foundry, Taiwan Semiconductor is really the king. It has a monopoly when you think of the advanced chips. And yes, there are all these other players that will benefit and you can make money on. But there are 2 other stocks that really stick out. The first one that's very obvious is going to be Broadcom. Now, Broadcom is going to be heavy in the networking and DSP, but also with ASIC. So these hyperscalers are building these ASIC, these ASIC chips to compete with GPUs. But they're partnering with companies like Broadcom. And I'm going to share something with you from Discord. So Google, who is the ASIC, the ASIC supplier? Broadcom. Networking, Broadcom. You also see Marvell Technologies, DSP, it's Broadcom. Now for Microsoft, you have Marvell Technologies as the ASIC supplier, the ASIC supplier, but you still see Broadcom and Broadcom. You're gonna see a trend here. MRVL and AVGO. AWS, here you go. Those two companies again. And then Meta, same two companies. You also see Astera Labs quite a bit in here. So the three companies that are very obvious, that are going to capture quite a bit of this revenue are going to be Nvidia, Broadcom, and Marvell Technology. So it's important to understand, guys, that you might buy a stock like John Deere because it's a high quality company, but I'm not necessarily going out and buying John Deere or Caterpillar, Generac, or Eaton, or any of those names because, oh, they're going to make so much revenue off of data center. And you also have to look at the margin profiles as well. But let me just circle the stocks on here, the companies that I think are going to be the best of breed and are really going to benefit you the most. If you're trying to invest in stocks, they're going to capitalize off of data center. So the hyperscalers are also doing these ASIC chips to compete against the NVIDIA GPUs. So these four companies, of course, are going to be high dollar. Now, what I will say is these companies are also the ones that are spending tons of CapEx. They're spending tons of money on NVIDIA. And the reality is that they're not really capitalized. They're not benefiting a ton off of AI yet. Now, what I will say, and this is something I've been telling you guys the whole time with AI, you want to focus on companies that are going to be selling B2B, enterprise technology, right? So if you think of Apple, they're going to sell AI as part of the new iPhones and their hardware, but that just becomes kind of part of the existing technology. It's something that's standard. It's something that's expected, right? When you think of AI PCs, it's something that's just expected. What I'm interested in are the companies that can benefit and that can scale. Now, the cloud service providers can do exactly that by selling to other companies. For GPU, Nvidia owns 80 to 90% of market share. Now, AMD, we're going to talk about in a little bit. AMD is a stock that I like and I do own. I think that this stock was a little bit of ahead of itself. Again, I'll talk about this one later. Intel has a lot to prove. Quite frankly, I don't own it. I am rooting for Intel. I hope that it improves. Taiwan Semiconductor is going to be the ultimate pick and shovel. Now, these other companies are great companies to invest in, like Lam and ASML and others, right? But I'm not going to buy these just because of data center. When I think of the true beneficiaries of data center, it's going to be the Broadcoms, the Marvell Technology, the Nvidias, right? These hyperscalers. I personally am not that interested in things like Eaton or Schneider Electric. You could also invest in operators, you know, some of these REITs. To me, I'd rather invest in companies like Nvidia. Now, one other stock that I think benefits is going to be Micron, MU, right? And that's going to be for memory. Anytime you have data centers, you're going to need memory, and Micron's going to be part of this as well. Anything outside of these, really, they're going to be beneficiaries, but they're more of what I would call fringe plays. And when I get to this slide, this is very much fringe plays to the point where a lot of these aren't really going to move the needle much at all. So let's talk about AMD. This was a stock we bought in Discord, $75 range, got to the $200 range, trimmed it off, told everybody this was, a year ago. AMD shouldn't be a $200 stock. It's way ahead of itself. People are trying to buy AMD thinking that it's going to give them a 500% return overnight the way Nvidia did. And quite frankly, it's just not going to do that. So the impressive number here is that the data center revenue is up 122%, and that is good. But we're talking about $3.5 billion. Now, this is Nvidia, and this is in millions. So we're talking about almost $31 billion in the same quarter. So $30.8 billion, and this is data center, right? Up 112%. So people will look at this and say, well, this is actually up 122%. But remember, we're talking about market share. We're talking about dollars spent. Now, Stargate, we're talking about $500 billion over the next 4 years. Companies specifically mentioned here, ARM, Microsoft, Nvidia, Oracle, and OpenAI. There's no mention of AMD in here. And here's where the stats get really interesting when you compare AMD versus Nvidia for GPU. If we look at 2025, The growth picture does not change. This article is saying that 2025 could be even worse than 2024 for AMD. AMD continues to struggle. Now, what they're talking about here is competing in that GPU space for data center. Do I like AMD? Yeah. Do I like Lisa Su? Absolutely. I own the stock. But listen to this. While NVIDIA's AI GPU revenues are forecasted to grow to $159.7 billion this year, AMD's AI GPU forecast for 2025 has been revised down to $8 billion. Now that's against consensus estimate of $9.6 billion. So assuming the $8 billion is what AMD actually achieves, this represents only about a 4% market share, far below NVIDIA's projected 80% share. So even though AMD is growing at 122%, their overall market share is actually decreasing to as low as 4%. Is AMD a great company? I believe it is. When I think of AMD, they are the leader for CPUs, not GPUs. The problem with CPUs is those are very much focused on that B2C. And this is a problem with Apple and as well as with AI PCs. Those are consumers, and that's not really where I want to focus my investment dollars. I want to focus again on enterprise. NVIDIA has the partnerships, has the relationships in enterprise, selling to other businesses that sell to other businesses. AMD's core competency really revolves around B2C more than B2B, and that gives AMD a huge disadvantage over NVIDIA. So looking on Seeking Alpha here, this is AMD. So we're looking at profitability, gross profit margin TTM, 52%. Now this is important. That same metric for NVIDIA is almost 76%. So we're talking about a 25% gap here. Now that's showing pricing power for NVIDIA, but it's also a huge risk for NVIDIA. What do I mean by that? What I mean is as competition comes in from AMD, from Intel, from ASIC, when those gross profit margins start to decrease from 75% to 60% for NVIDIA, the stock's probably going to get hammered. NVIDIA has competition coming from all directions at this point. But with all that said, right now, NVIDIA still is the leader, and this cycle is not even close to being over. Blackwell is selling like hotcakes, and Rubin is on deck. At some point, I've told you guys NVIDIA is going to peak out, but I do not believe the time is now. I'm going to look at a chart here in a second. I'm going to tell you exactly where I think NVIDIA stock is headed in 2025. Now, the thing with Wall Street is Wall Street always wants this growth to keep going up, up, and up. But NVIDIA is now, $3 trillion, almost a $3.5 trillion market cap. So it's impossible for it to keep the same 152% growth. Forward revenue growth projected to slow down, but it's still amazing, 93.77%. And this might shock a few people, especially the ones that don't pay attention to the details. AMD is only growing forward growth at 10.96%. So the ones that are saying that this should be a $250 stock, I'm not sure they understand the fundamentals as well as they should. Now, from a valuation perspective, neither of these stocks are inexpensive. This is AMD. The PE gap forward is a 94.63, but you're talking about 10% growth. NVIDIA for that same metric is 51.79. So NVIDIA is still quite a bit less expensive than AMD, and it's growing at 9x of what AMD is. So looking at a chart, you know the story here. NVIDIA was, under $15. This is going back to January 2023. Of course, a split was in here. Stock ripped from $10.81 October of 2022 all the way up to $150 plus. Now we've really had a double top around that $153 level. Today it's trading at $145. So it's gotten to that and fallen down. You can see $152.89 dropped to $126, right back up to that 153 level, dropped again to $129. So we are back above the 50-day moving average here, this yellow line. This Fibonacci R3 is going to be closer to that 155 level. Now earnings are going to be coming up very soon, next month. I think if earnings are good, the stock is going to 165 to 175. That's going to be in this level right here. Now I've been saying this for months, back in 2024, that NVIDIA would be $165 to $175 in 2025. I still believe that, but earnings do have to deliver. And I think it's possible this stock could even push to $200 a share if the stars align, if the earnings reports crush it. Earnings and guidance are going to be absolutely critical for NVIDIA. So the question's always, what stock should I buy now? And here's the thing. If you missed NVIDIA, you're trying to find that next big winner. Sometimes we try to get a little bit too cute. The reality is the best stock for data center to buy right now, it's still Nvidia. You're not going to get the 10x returns that we already saw, but there's still upside. And I strongly believe you're going to see that 165 to 175 in 2025. Hope this video is helpful. If you're new, make sure you subscribe, drop me a like, drop me a comment. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.